So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that people like Zeke. I don't really think there's much up for debate on that one. People even like to bring up the fact that he has a lot more depth than originally meets the eye, and how there's a bunch of cool stuff for him more than just haha funny man falls off cliffs a lot. Despite that though, I don't think he gets all the credit he deserves, so basically I'm going to talk about him in a video like the one you are watching right now that will contain spoilers for all of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Now, with my starting to transition to be a Xeno channel as a whole and not just a Xenoblade channel, the first big thing about Zeke that needs to be brought up is his similarities and connection to Bartholomew Fatima, a character from Xenogears. It is very obvious that he was supposed to resemble this character. You know, princes wearing eye patches in exile when first met and all. And anyone who's played or even just knows a bit about Xenogears will look at Zeke and be like, yep, he's the Bart of this game. They're doing a much more direct reimagining of him than they've ever really done before. He does differ from Bart, though, in a bunch of key and interesting ways that can totally be its own video later on. But since you don't really need to know Bart to get Zeke, I'm not going to elaborate on that connection here. One cool thing that I think might have been a reference, though, is the primary NPC of Cosmos' Blade Quest is Estelle, Zeke's cousin who he never met because she was born after he left Tantal, and there's a joke where he accidentally is like, oh, haha, I'll treat you like a younger sister, and he realizes it came out wrong because of the goddamn stupid fetishizing your younger sister. Don't do that. Like, if you think that Xenoblade 2 has no shame with its depiction of female characters, at least, like, it mocks that trope. So it does have a line. It's just a bit further than some people would like it to be. But anyway, I think that this joke might actually be a reference to how Bart is betrothed to his cousin in Xenogears. So they might be, like, making fun of that because this obviously medieval-ish themed world is a bit less medieval in its royalty marrying practices, as far as I can tell, than the one in Xenogears, so I think it might be tying into that. But anyway, normally a character like Zeke would be a sidekick or a rival-type character that's heavily skewed to the comic relief angle. Going back to Bart again, he is definitely that. He's the same age as Faye, who's the actual protagonist, and becomes his de facto best friend by the end of the game. But Zeke breaks the mold. He is actually a mentor figure. He's much older than Rex, 25 according to a heart-to-heart, compared to Rex's 15 according to a developer interview. And his moments of wisdom don't really come from him being a bumbling dumbass who sometimes happens to be smart and talented, but the fact that he's actually a mature individual with a lot more knowledge and experience than you'd originally expect from looking at him. So let's just talk about the big thing in all caps here. Zeke's heroic persona is in fact a persona and doesn't 100% reflect his real self. I would go out and say that Zeke von Genbu, chaotic bringer of chaos, while he has a lot of similarities to Crown Prince Ozzyclaris Brune of Tantal of the Kingdom of Tantal, that they're not really the same person, if you get down to it. So first off, where did this heroic persona come from, and the idea of having to be a flamboyant, over-the-top hero and stuff? Well, first off, it came from him idolizing Adam as a child, and basically wanting to live up to his ancestor's legacy. Obviously, he later finds out that Adam is not his ancestor, and that is a bit of a point of contention and a minor crisis for him, but he gets over it pretty quickly because who are you to keep a good Zekeinator down? All he has of Adam are a bunch of stories that have definitely evolved over 500 years, and I guess flanderized would be the best term for it, because that is sort of how records of obviously historical people come. They become more mythologized, if that's the correct word for it, and things are exaggerated over time, as well as only keeping the most exciting things and then exaggerating those even more. Despite all this, though, it turns out that he isn't really off the mark if you check Turn of the Golden Country. Adam's heroic spirit and idealism are clearly enclosed in Rex, who's probably his actual descendant, but the whole lovable dumbassness is definitely alive and kicking in Zeke. The other thing is his disillusionment with Tantal itself. He does not care for its isolationist policies one bit, especially after seeing the state the rest of the world is in after he leaves it. He genuinely wants to help people. He is a fictional royal. That is what they do if they're not evil. But under the system of government, or just the general policy Tantal is in, he can't really do that, because in order to bring Tantal out of its funk, I think it would require intervention or resources from other nations that, you can't really do when you're isolationist. So basically, after being exiled, he wanted to become a wandering folk hero type guy. That is, he wanted to. He tried to become a hero. He failed. In a heart-to-heart with Rex, he explains that he tried to help people he came across. He went through a lot of rough areas and saw a bunch of down-on-their-luck people, and he tried to do the right thing, but he couldn't because, in his words, fancy sword skills and titles, they aren't much use to most folks. I was trying to save the world alone, but what happened is that reality bit me on the arse. He was younger and naive, but came to realize that he couldn't change things on his own. He probably couldn't change things entirely on his own even once he became king. It's likely that that heroic persona is also in part a mask to hide some of the insecurities that resulted from that revelation, which I wouldn't be surprised if he's still dealing with later. Zeke shows his depths a few times throughout the story, mostly when talking to Rex, but he also really gets to shine in his heart-to-hearts, where you get to see him open up a bit more about his worldview and the things he's experienced on his travels. In that same conversation with Rex and Torgoth, he criticizes Morardain's colonialism, citing how Torgoth is doing well because there's a military base there, while people in most other settlements in the province do hard work producing things that are just exported to Morardain proper and are really struggling. He also has his great speech I've mentioned before when he talks about Fonset, and how it's a wholly unique place in all of Allrest, and the only place Rex could come from. Like, if a kid grows up in Albacavanic, he's gonna want to join the army, right? Not saying that's bad or anything, but I don't think a kid like that would wind up as the Aegis's driver. Can't be easy raising the kind of boy who could change the future of Allrest. All the world's nations and establishments aren't gonna foster that kind of potential. But this village? It's cut off from all that. A place of freedom and possibilities. With Morag and Tantal, he talks about patriotism, loyalty to one's country, and how being royalty affects that. He again reiterates that shutting your country off from the world might protect your people, but is ultimately running away from responsibility and delaying the inevitable. He is much more loyal to his idealized version of Old Torna, and the idea of Tantal being a successor state to that, than the present situation his Tantal is actually in. He's very obviously against isolationism and advocates the peaceful sharing of resources, if not an outright fully globalized society, but he also seems to be anti-refugee based on a conversation when the party first reaches Indal. The refugees in question are Gormati, who fled from the war in which Gormat was subjugated by Morardain, and he's sympathetic towards the Gormati that stayed on their Titan, so it's sort of unclear if he's anti-refugee in general, or just annoyed at this group for being taken in by Indal and then protesting against Indal because he works for Indal at the time, or he disagrees with their anti-Blade sentiments based on his experience and close relationship with his Blade. Of course, then Indal ends up definitely being in the wrong by the end of the game because they're controlled by an overpowered madman who wants to end creation. So I really couldn't tell you how Zeke would treat refugees if he were actually King of Tantal, but I just thought that was an interesting thing to bring up. Back to the goofy side though. He obviously has one, but a lot of it is a genuine sense of humor and wanting to be the funny guy in the room, or part of the hero persona, as opposed to, haha, he is stupid. The bumbling stuff definitely comes more from his absurdly bad luck than any stupidity on his part. The bad luck is an aspect of him, but it's not really something he controls. He is unlucky, but it isn't necessarily a fault of his character or something that would be a negative attribute of him as a person. It's just a quality that he has, the same as having gray hair or only one functioning eye, even though that's apparently because of the contact thing, but that is beside the point here. Zeke is a very skilled swordsman. He was apparently the best in Tantal when he left Tantal. Now, again, obviously, isolationist, they weren't exactly fighting wars or fighting anyone really, and they probably didn't have many other nations to compare against, but he was a lot younger when he left Tantal. And years have passed since then, years in which He was presumably training as he wandered the world and tried to be a hero, and then acted as a special envoy from Indal that probably required some degree of martial skill. He is equal to Morag, according to someone who's fought her twice and him 3 times, aka Rex, who at this point is pretty well on his way to mastering Mithra's abilities when he says this, so again, coming from a big place. And yeah, obviously, he is actually pretty smart and pretty worldly as a result of all the travels he does. He is politically savvy enough to see through the bullshit on multiple occasions throughout the game, and he is actually able to act as a representative of Tantal in a conference of world leaders, including the Emperor of Morardain, the Queen of Araya, Amalthus, Nira is there for some reason, and he hasn't even come back to Tantal and reconciled with his father yet. So he is playing like 4D chess with the world if you really think about it. And also, he was able to tell that Moratha was destroyed in a war, basically just at a glance of it. And yeah, Rex being able to figure that out himself if you choose the option in the heart-to-heart, which I think is the better option for trust, does show a good thing about Rex. And Rex actually has a bunch of really good lines about how, yeah, he realizes that his idealism isn't actually practical. But hey, guess what? Now I have the Aegis, so maybe I can actually do something. But the fact that Zeke was able to tell that is still pretty important, because again, the idea of what the land of Moratha is in general is a completely alien concept to the people of Alrest, who are basically just living in city-states from over a millennium ago, and they're looking at a metropolis beyond even the wildest dreams of the present day. And this is also not even counting his multiple great pep talks he gives to Rex, his multiple actual advice he gives to Rex, and the begrudging respect he ends up winning from Morag, because their relationship is great. It's basically Zeke being the rival character to the more stoic and serious other character that you'd expect him to have with the protagonist, but it's instead him bouncing off Rex's other mentor figure, basically. And it's a cool kind of dynamic there, where they both teach Rex different things about growing up and becoming the kind of person who will inherit the world one day. And then we have to talk about his relationship with Pandoria, because it is also very interesting and very special. She is basically an enabler for his more goofy antics, but is also still somehow able to rein him in before he goes too far. They seem to have a really strong bond even before he almost died, saving her from becoming a sex slave, by the way. That's what those bandits were looking for if you read between the lines. But once he became a Blade Eater, it was a lot more symbolic that they were having a very important connection. I don't know why I said they were having. That did not sound right, but I'm keeping it in because I'm this far, and who am I to stop now? Their relationship is not explicitly romantic. Technically, if you want to nitpick, the only times it's outright confirmed that someone has romantic feelings for someone else are at Nia towards Rex, and then Rex towards the Aegis. But it's probably the most overtly alluded to mutual feelings thing besides the actual main couple of the game. Body language in the ending aside, she gets very embarrassed in a heart-to-heart when it's suggested that she's in love with him, although admittedly the opposite choice has her asking to be his sister figure instead of his mother figure, so eh. And there's the mysterious unvoiced thing he says to her that makes her really happy. They have a never leave each other's side type pact going, and he might have suggested that at that point in time, but it could have also easily been an actual declaration of love or something equivalent to that. Either way, though, they would definitely have a happy relationship, even if it'd probably not be great for the stability of the kingdom Zeke's going to inherit one day, and also probably bad for the whole production of an heir thing, depending on how blade anatomy actually works. We know that the humanoid ones look like humans, and that it was considered socially acceptable to marry a human at some point, but we still don't actually know if they can conceive with humans. Yes, they have very similar DNA, so possibly, but they're also kind of living weapon generating things that reproduce asexually through the Titan cycle, so even if they're brought into a very human shape, would they I do not need to think about this anymore. We're talking about Zeke. But yeah, basically Zeke is a good character, and I know I didn't talk about Turters, but he's basically only there to be part of the comic relief shtick, and has nothing to do with the deeper side of Zeke, so I didn't talk about him because it wasn't really the point of the video. And speaking of the video, this is the end of the video, of which I am ending right now. Thank you for watching. I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning, but there might be an up to 2-week break in uploads of this channel, just because I'm going on vacation and don't exactly have the time to make 2 videos, because I'll be gone for 2 Sundays, and have them pre-uploaded. Like, I could do that, obviously, but also I might not have time to do that, and then the normal video for next week, so yeah, don't keep your hopes up for videos coming out on October 13th and 20th, but yeah, there's going to be one on the 27th, so I don't know. Also, Xenogears recaps are going to be coming back the week I come back from vacation, so yeah, goodbye.